Hey, it's Sam from Folk of All Trades here. Don't know if you can hear, there's actually yellowtail black cockatoos flying overhead. So this video is all about nature connection, and I thought that was a great place to start. So I want to acknowledge Resilient South for supporting this video. That's the cities of Mitcham, Marion, Holdfast Bay and Onkaparinga, and together they are Resilient South. And I also want to acknowledge I'm here on beautiful Kaurna country. So we're down in Ngaldinga, Aldinga, where Danny and I live, and always grateful to be on Kaurna country and the beautiful nature that's still here. So there's two things I broadly want to cover today in this nature connection video. The first half kind of relates to biodiversity and improving biodiversity around your home, and that's all about building up nature, so trying to give back, trying to improve, and then obviously we get to enjoy that as well. But the other part is all about nature connection itself. So how do we deepen our connection to the nature that we encounter every day, but also those special places like in national parks or when we go traveling around our beautiful state. What are some of the ways that we can improve biodiversity around our homes? Well, number one for me is by planting local native species. So you saw some that we're growing there. One of my absolute favourites is this tea tree. It's a Melaleuca decussata. It's called totem poles, and it grows into quite a decent sized shrub, really dense with beautiful purple flowers. And the reason I like to plant dense shrubs is that things like silver eyes and pardalotes and wrens, these really small birds, they really like to shelter in those, and they feel protected from some of those bigger birds that can be more bullies, things like magpies and noisy miners that we get so commonly in the suburbs where there's just a tree and a grass layer. So by having shrubs, we can really increase biodiversity. Of course, insects are going to make use of those as well. The thing about planting local native species is that they've co-evolved with all of the different animals that we want to encourage in our suburbs. If you're lucky enough to have a big tree, particularly a eucalypt that's got natural hollows in it, then that's just absolutely fantastic for biodiversity. We've got really hollow dependent species, not just birds, things like kookaburras and rosellas and galahs, but also things like mammals. So our possums are quite hollow dependent, and things like bats as well. If you don't have a really big established gum, which unfortunately not many of us do anymore, then we can actually increase the habitat by creating a nesting box. You might have seen bird nesting boxes. They're quite common around the place, but you may not have seen a bat nesting box. So this one has been built, not by me. I bought this one, and it's a really cool design in that bats can actually land on this plate here where there's some grooves been cut, and that means the bat can come in, land, and then get its little claws in and climb up into the box. And it's quite a small space, obviously, so they're pretty safe and protected in there. They can roost during the day when they're not active, and then fly out at night and collect food, and also raise young in there. It differs to a bird box in that the bird boxes normally have a hole at the front and typically are quite a bit deeper, depending on the species of bird. So that would be my recommendation, is to figure out what kind of species that you want to encourage around your home. If it's small birds or larger birds, there's even really big nesting boxes for things like kookaburras and for owls. And then you can get the design of your nest box to suit. Danny started just there with a bit of a homemade version that's just kind of a nice piece of aesthetic. But we do actually find that sparrows use that every spring, so that's kind of cool. Nesting boxes are a great addition, but they do need to be installed either by a professional or someone who knows what they're doing. Obviously, when you're putting something high up in a tree, you really don't want that to fall down. So I find you need to have a real good think about your fixing method, knowing that the tree is going to grow as well over time. So something like this tech screw, screwed in and then checked, maintained, so that as the tree grows, the connection is still strong. But as I said, there's professionals that will install it for you and supply you with the kind of nest box you need. Something you may be doing already is providing water for particularly birds. That's a great thing to do, especially in summer when it can get really, really dry and surface water levels dry up. So we like to have a bird bath here, actually right in front of an area we sit inside, and that means we can observe and really enjoy the birds that come and visit. But not only do birds use bird baths, but actually insects are quite reliant on them as well. And unfortunately, a lot of bird baths can be quite dangerous for insects and frogs, in that if they get in, and particularly if it's got a bit of algae or it's quite slippery, they can struggle to get out again and drown. So what we've done is actually just put some stones. I don't remember where these came from originally, just that we've collected from over the years, and just pile those up so that if an insect does come and drink, it can safely get down to the water and then get back out. And the same thing with a frog, it could actually climb out and be safe. It's really important to keep that clean, so to clean it out regularly and to top it up. You know, it is possible to spread diseases, so yeah, making sure it's nice and clean, we can take care of our birds that way. The other kind of water point that we like to put out, particularly in summer again, is something that's actually on the ground. So again, insects will use this, but we've noticed that we have quite a lot of blue-tongue lizards that like to frequent our garden, and we love to have the blue-tongue lizards because they eat slugs and snails, and are just such cool things to have around as well. And so a blue-tongue lizard will come and actually drink from this, being at ground level. It can't get up to a raised bird bath. So having that somewhere, ideally a bit more protected. I've just brought this out here to show you. We noticed that the blue tongue really likes to climb along the back of our garden beds. They like to be sort of nestled, and only infrequently will they come out into the open, maybe if they feel really safe, if you've got inside pets and things like that. While we're here, there is one other thing I wanted to show you about our bird bath. You'll see this is just a log. Someone was chopping down a tree one day, and I managed to salvage this. It's from a lemon scented gum, and it's got all these amazing natural holes in it and these beautiful textures that I think were created by some kind of grub larvae. Could have been from a moth or some other kind of insect. And so it's created these natural holes that I've noticed native bees really love to visit. So native bees and native wasps, quite a few of them require a hollow like this in timber. Others will use clay or they'll burrow into the ground. But the ones that use timber, they love to use these to lay their eggs and to raise the next generation. So if you're observant, you can actually see them coming and visiting, and then putting food in there for their babies and flying away. So that's a really cool thing. Of course, you can make bee hotels as well. I'd recommend only making small ones. In nature, of course, these holes are spread out, and they'd be across the landscape. They wouldn't all just be concentrated in one area. So if you've got too many nesting sites all together, that makes it really easy for a predator, which could be a honey eater, a bird, or some kind of parasitic wasp, to just go from one to one to one and eat them all. So spread them out if you can, keep them small, and that way you'll be doing a great job for native bees. You've improved the biodiversity around your home and in your garden, and so you really want to make the most of that by connecting with it. And a really great way to do that is by observing and studying birds. Our favourite bird tips and tricks, and we've got quite a few because we did a fantastic WEA course with Birds SA a few years ago, are to just observe, to get out there and to really pay attention to the birds that are around your home, but also when you're out in the bush or in a park. So by really paying attention to the defining characteristics of a bird, often they're called the general impression, size and shape, or GIS for short, you can actually really quickly identify what kind of bird that is. And that might be to do with its markings, so what colour, its size, the shape of its body, but also you can actually start to figure out what birds you see just based on their silhouette or the way that they move or the way that they fly. And one example that Danny and I were talking about just recently is if a bird is right up in the top of the tree and foraging around, it's quite unlikely to be something like a blue wren, similar, a very small bird, but it could be something like a thornbill, which tend to be of a similar shape, but they're much more likely to be up in the top of the tree. Now, there are lots of different apps and books you can use for trying to identify what bird is what. This is quite a good one, a field guide that we use pretty frequently. And you can get down to like a certain level often. I've just pulled out one that's quite common around here that we've started hearing a lot, a grey strike thrush. Now, you know, grey and brown birds are some of the most difficult to identify. So it does really help to have something like a bird app. And again, grey strike thrush is in there. But the benefit of having an app is obviously it's digital media, and so we can actually listen. We can listen to the birds and kind of confirm what we think it might be. You know, it could be 5 different grey birds, but by listening to it, we can actually hear and confirm it. Now, you want to use this power for good. There have been reports of people using calls out in nature to try and get birds to come close and maybe get photographs and things like that. But of course, that's pretty confusing for a bird, and it interrupts their natural behaviours. So, you know, best to listen to that away from where you actually observe the bird. You don't want to confuse it and think, oh, there's a mate, I'm going to go and stop feeding or stop whatever I'm doing and be interrupted. When you're observing birds with another person, sometimes you'll see a bird first and you'll want to point out where in the tree often it is. And so a really good way to actually communicate that rather than pointing, which can be pretty random and frustrating for both of you, is to use this clock system. So exactly as you would think, 12 at the top, 6 down the bottom, you can tell people, there's a small brown bird at 3 o'clock towards the back of the tree or at the front of the tree. And so just by giving those little clues, everyone can kind of hone in on the right kind of area to be looking at. The other thing that makes observing a little bit more fun, and you know, particularly when you're just starting to get to know birds and you really want to get as close as you possibly can to see those identifying features, is to use a pair of binoculars. Now, binoculars are, you know, quite varied. They're just like digital cameras in that they can be really, really cheap and kind of entry level all the way up to extremely expensive. Obviously find one that suits your budget. But one little trick that not a lot of people know about binoculars, and happens to come with some of the more premium models, is this eye cup. So if you wear glasses like us, or you've got really deep set eyes like I do, you can actually adjust these to make it a really comfortable distance from your eyes. And that means that you can rest it against your face. It's a lot more stable. And of course you can adjust in and out as well. What you're looking for is a single circle. So both your eyes are focusing on that single circle, and then adjusting the focus knob until it becomes clear. So those are our bird tips and tricks. It's a really, really fun thing to do. Whether you're at home, in the middle of the city, or out in the bush, you're bound to see birds. One of my favorite ways to connect with nature is actually to do a practice called Sit Spot. And it's kind of like a meditation, but really you're tuning into all of your senses at once and really trying to take in what's around you. Rather than trying to quiet your mind, you're opening it and getting in as much as possible. And a sit spot can be in your garden, could be at a local park or somewhere you like to spend time, or it could be out in the bush as well. Maybe you've gone on a hike and you know, you're chatting and you're walking, and it can be really easy to let things fly by you. But Danny and I have noticed if we go for a hike and we just sit even for 5 minutes, everything calms down around you and you start to notice things that you just had no idea were there when you were kind of moving through. And one of the reasons for that is while we're moving around, when we're gardening or when we're hiking, we're actually creating this bubble of disturbance around us that, you know, birds and lizards and animals are basically trying to move away from us because we're a disturbing effect in the environment. But if you stop and you're quiet and you just start observing, then you'll be surprised at what comes to you. And it's not just with your eyes, but you know, by picking things and smelling them, and by listening and feeling what the wind is doing and where it's coming from, you can get a lot of information, sensory information about your environment. I'll tell you a little story about a great experience I had doing a sit spot just here in the garden one day. It was a couple of years ago during spring, and I'd been noticing these New Holland honeyeaters, these beautiful little black and gold birds that dart around in family groups. And they've got a particular kind of alarm call. Most bird alarm calls are quite aggressive and sharp, and they're and I noticed them making this huge racket off to my right. So I started watching and really paying attention. What are they doing? They were darting in and out of this bush, and I thought maybe they were nesting in there given how much time they were spending. And all of a sudden I saw this big black raven that was bouncing and moving through this bush as well, and I could tell these New Holland honeyeaters did not want it to be there. They were mobbing it, they were rushing in and trying to get it to leave, making a huge amount of noise. And it reminded me that I've seen other birds actually interact with a raven in a similar way, so didn't quite know what was happening. Later on I went and did some research and found out that ravens are actually nest robbers. So not only will they eat the eggs of birds, but they'll also eat the young. So that's what that raven was undoubtedly doing, coming in, trying to eat the babies of these New Holland honeyeaters, and they were doing everything they could to stop it. And thankfully they were successful, because I noticed little New Hollands roaming around soon after, and I've been observing them ever since. So having that sit spot is just a beautiful way to connect with your immediate surroundings, and you can do it over time, different seasons. It's really, really interesting to see those changes, and a great way to slow down and connect with what's around you. So I hope you found that interesting and useful. The main thing is just to get out there and to spend time outside in nature and to slow down and see what comes to you. Some people love to draw, some people love to take photos, some people just like to sit. So do whatever works for you. A big thanks again to Resilient South for supporting this video, and hope to see you in the next one.